In this session, you're gonna see yet another TikTok atheist run from the Christ. Now, this kid in particular, that goes by Godless Reggie, is a whole lot weaker in regards to supposed knowledge than the last one that ran. So it's not surprising that when overwhelmed, he chose to react like a coward. And on top of it, he clearly has a complete lack of knowledge when it comes to what he's trying to stand on. He also is very creepy, as you'll hear, continuously trying to use my name in such a creep manner, and then turning around and saying he doesn't like my name. Again, supposedly being a grown man, asking me what my age is before I begin to dialogue with him. Again, just utter weakness on top of pathetically running. Now here, we are in a little bit of a conundrum, because on one hand, I am exactly as I'm saying that I am, and of course, how, with that being the fact, could I wholeheartedly expect these kids to stand a chance against me? But yet at the same time, the level of dunce that I am dealing with some of these characters is disappointing, to say the least. And to any person who's not a planted pretender on one of these lives trying to be a subtle influencer, truly be mindful when you find yourselves on one of these lives, because so far every single one of them that I speak to don't want to stand on their own words that they were saying within the very same live, let alone any time before that. So quickly their words are meaningless to even their own selves, as you're about to see here a fine example of. So let alone, you need to be all the more careful in regards to what you allow to influence you. Some of these people, they don't even stand on nor believe their own bull junk, to say the least. Let alone, once more, a whole lot of these TikTok thugs start getting cabin fever, getting bunker fever, and start conducting themselves in a manner that, once more, quite frankly, they would never do in person. Literally. So being as that this person, quote, Godless Reggie, didn't even last 5 minutes, we'll go through the entire conversation, and at every point, we will stop to truly illustrate and demonstrate each point itself.
Can y'all hear me right now?
Hello,
yeah, I can. He was in the
Land of Christ. Where you at, brother?
He was in the chats commenting for a long time. There he is.
Mandy, let me get your age and your religion.
Yes, I'm over 18. Thank you. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
How old?
I'm 37 myself.
Okay. What religion?
Yes, I believe in the exact same God that was held by the Israelites since Adam and Eve on down.
Okay. You can't prove nothing in that book.
Okay, I heard.
But you're willing to believe it. Why is that?
I heard you earlier mention that there were those such as, for example, in other words, the conquistadors that were coming and spreading the Bible.
That's irrelevant.
Well, it is relevant because where the conquistadors landed, there was actually a castle pyramid that's called the Castle Pyramid. It's a calendar.
Listen, we know.
Now, to put this into perspective, in Exodus 12:2, you will read about a calendar which begins in the spring. Now, that calendar did not just begin upon the Exodus from Egypt, but was the original calendar of the angel preserved by the Israelites, such as Aaron, the brother of Moses, and whom were the elders of that time. As this calendar was passed down to Enoch by the angels, his parents, his family before him. And as you are seeing here, historians through time preserved that Enoch indeed architected the pyramids prior to the flood. We will also see further proof of that flood that you may not be so familiar with yet. So here we are about to see further proof that the whole earth was of one language, as is held in Genesis 11 verse 1. As you are about to see the original calendar of the angels expressed in a masterful display of architecture in a place where you may not have thought that anyone related to any Israelites on up the line back to Adam and Eve would have ever been before. It is true that the cosmic order of the very stars by their organization is in sync exactly with the calendar, and proof of exactly that is the Castle Pyramid, a calendar represented in stone, both with its architectural layout of having a body of water underneath, such as renowned to be the case with the pyramids around the world, and also representing the calendar of the angels with its features. It proves all the more Genesis chapter 11 verse 1 that all the world was of one language. And reinforcement of that is that it is held that the 7 lighted triangles and the 6 dark triangles, which takes place at both the spring and the autumn, the fall equinox, represent the 7 days of creation, of course, exactly just as the account of Genesis. This masterful genius displayed, channeled through architecture by the grace of God, shows that this calendar has been and is indeed perfect, let alone without calendar drift, as precisely 182 days pass between the 2 equinoxes, 182 days of course being half of the 364-day year. And if need be, perhaps in the near future we can do a recount to make sure to reaffirm this fact, that the arrangement of the very stars follows the order within the calendar passed down since Adam and Eve. Thus, the phenomena at the Castle Pyramid. And just as there are 4 dimensions of time and space, and also the number 7, as in Genesis, stands for a cycle in time, we see that the 364-day calendar is divisible by both 4 and 7.
The group that wrote the scrolls dated their festivals every year according to a 364-day calendar. This group had a 364-day calendar, which is exactly divisible by 7, so that the same date fell on the same day of the week every year. It never changed. And this had some advantages, such as festivals never falling on the Sabbath.
And now here we'll see the very features of the calendar castle pyramid, which represent the 364-day calendar which was passed down to Enoch since Adam and Eve, preserved through the flood since Noah, and Emzara to their children, preserved and protected through time down to the warrior angels in Qumran. Now to the features of that very calendar etched into an edifice, into this work of art, which proves Genesis 11 verse 1, that all the world was of one language.
In the Dead Sea Scrolls, we have numerous documents who are talking about solar calendar, of pre-calculated calendar emerging, commencing in the spring. While the Jewish calendar, known to all of you who are following the Jewish calendar, is starting in the autumn. The current Jewish calendar is starting in the autumn, in the month of Tishrei, while the biblical calendar states explicitly that the calendar starts in the spring. In the book of Exodus 12, we are told that the calendar is commencing in the months of the spring, the first month of the year, where the year is starting as a divine declaration of the beginning of freedom, of the epoch of freedom. It is given up in the time where the story of the departure from Egypt, the exodus from Egypt, then there is a calendar introduced, and it is said, this month, the month of the spring, is the head of the year, or the first of the month. You would always start to count from the first month. Is the presence of a solar calendar, a calendar which the writers ascribe to a mythical ancient past. The people who had authored the book of First Enoch, it's called the Ethiopian Enoch because it was first known to us in the language of Giz, which is an Ethiopian language, Semitic Ethiopian language. In the book of Enoch, chapter 72-82, is telling us in great detail on the calendar of 364 days. In the book of Psalms that had been found in Qumran, entirely different genre, you know, Psalms. In the extra Psalms, those which are not known to us in the Bible, in the Psalm scrolls which is presented in the shrine of the book, in column 27 we are told that David, king of Israel, the one who had been described as wise and as poetically gifted and as a prophet according to this scroll, had authored 364 daily songs for each day of the year. He further had authored 52 sacred songs for every one of the Sabbaths of the years. He further authored 18 special songs for the holidays of the year. Now, in entirely different kind of genre, let's say the book of Jubilees, which is para-biblical because it is retelling the book of Genesis. In the book of Jubilees, we are told that Noah had stayed in the ark 364 days, which are divided equally to 4 seasons of 91 days, commencing in the spring. The same is true for the scroll of priestly watches, which is worked on a calendar of 364 days. The same is true to a letter called Miktzat Maaseh Torah, a few observations on the acts of the Torah, The scroll is commencing with a calendar, telling us that the first week of the year starts in the spring, and there are 52 weeks in every year, and in each week a different priestly scroll is serving according to a calendar of 364 days. Now, the centrality of the solar calendar could not be exaggerated in the library of Qumran. As I said, in various different genres, in various different literary modes, the centrality of the calendar is put forward. It was a priestly calendar, divided according to the priestly sevenfold divisions. Because if there was anything sacred to the priestly calendar, it was the following assertion: the covenant between God and his people is based on the following fact: every 7 day one should not work on a Sabbath. Every 7 holidays of the first 7 months of the year, one must refrain from work according to the biblical law.
And further testament to the goodness, to the greatness of our literally Almighty God is the fact that the 4th commandment is to remember to observe the Sabbath. Notice a connection again between 4, as in the 4 dimensions of time and space, and the number 7, since Genesis standing for a cycle in time and is the 7th day of the week, the Sabbath. And to put this as closely as possible, just as any loving parent would do for you, in time you find out that what was commanded of you was ultimately for your own good. And beautifully, science shows that aspects of our biology, our very bodies, operates on a 7-day cycle. And to say the least, once more, this calendar, this 7-day cycle has been passed down since Adam and Eve, ultimately passed on to Moses, who passed it on once again to the Israelites, the Hebrews in the desert. And as we see 7 representing a cycle in time in all the ways that it does, such as Jericho being circled 7 times on a 7th day, which is a conversation in itself. And as we are blessed with living in a time where we are able to see such revelations, it makes all the more clear Revelation 5:5 and the breaking of the 7 seals, as it is a complete honor, of course, to share this reality.
Listen. We know that there's all kind of pyramids in Mexico and South America. So what? That's irrelevant. There's nothing in that book that you can prove. There's nothing in that book that you can prove, but you want us to believe it. Why is that?
Thank you, Reggie. Actually, your exact words actually prove the Bible. Genesis 11 verse 1 reads that the whole world was of one language. And the fact that there are pyramids around the world, just as you mentioned.
Landy,
sorry, sir. Did you hear me?
Landy.
Can I finish the thought, sir?
Landy. Did you graduate from high school?
Did I graduate from high school? Sir, you didn't even finish what I was saying. Well, you didn't even hear me out.
Listen, I had to stop you because once you get on some bullshit, I'm going to stop you. You just said that the whole world is going to have one language. At no time in history has the whole world had one language. So therefore, your point is moot.
You're actually incorrect. Archaeology proves.
No, I'm not.
You are incorrect.
That's not true. Pull up the article to prove what you're saying.
Such as the Proto-Chinese, yes, such as the Proto-Chinese actually describes scenes of Genesis, and also just as in China.
That's not true.
Chinese character for boat is made up of the characters for vessel, eight, and mouth, held to also represent people. The origins of these characters completely align with the records of Genesis, as in Noah's Ark there were 8 people: Noah, his wife, 3 sons, and their 3 wives. The character for garden is made up of the characters for dust, breath, 2 persons, and an enclosure, to mean garden. This parallels God making Adam and Eve in the garden, forming mankind from the dust of the earth. The Chinese character for naked consists of the characters for man and fruit, drawing a parallel to mankind eating the fruit and discovering that they were naked, as in Genesis. There are also more overlays within the characters. And as part of this history of the human race, of the angels, continues to come into focus, we are able to see parallels within the 6 days of creation and what is held as the border sacrifice. The Hebrew El Shaddai and the Chinese Shangdai or Shangdi, both meaning God, and all the more proving our Genesis, our God, ultimately, is the fact that there were no images representing this monotheistic God, such as in the second commandment given unto Moses. Now, though these Proto-Chinese letters were not the original script of the human being, of the angel, but derived from it, further proving Genesis 11 verse 1 that all the world was of one language. In a moment, we will be getting into what exactly is that original script. Now, just for the moment, back to this unfortunately complete idiot, completely set against the wrong thing, has no idea that just like anybody else, if you are against the truth of God, you are going to look just like this, let alone with all the more consequences along with it.
That's not true. That's
You can
not true.
find it through my
Pull up the
following
article to
my
prove
video.
it. This is our bro. Trust me, logic. You cannot prove that in the whole world there was one language.
Now, first of all,
And pyramids do not prove that verse. So stop lying,
hold
please.
on, you're not even hearing me out. There was somebody on this live earlier that said that our religion came from Samaria. That person, in his own words, wasn't otherwise saying that something came
I
from
don't
something.
care what they said. I ain't talking
Hold on
about them.
now.
I'm
If you
talking
have a
about you.
2-second memory
There's nothing.
span,
Listen.
that's your problem.
Listen.
However,
Listen. I don't care nothing about that. Want me to show you what my problem is, Landy? Because I can show you real fast.
if it's running away, then that's your problem.
I ain't running from shit. I'm gonna kick you. I ain't running.
Oh, that's
you gonna run
running.
from my foot.
Then can you explain
No, you gonna
Isaiah?
run from my foot.
Explain Isaiah.
No. I'm not explaining anything.
19,
I'm not explaining
19,
anything.
20.
Prove something. Listen, I'm not explaining anything to you, right? This is what I want you to do.
You want to run
I
very
want you to
calmly?
prove something in that book is true. And so far, you failed to do
You
that.
won't even
and
hear
you
me
also
out,
have
boy.
lied.
Explain Isaiah 19, 19,
The world
and
has
20.
never had one language.
The gematria.
Ever.
Explain
Landy.
the gematria of 19, 19, and 20, equating to the...
Unmute yourself. Landy. I don't like your name either.
Well, that's pretty rude of you to say that, being as that you don't know.
So what? It's very honest.
Well, you should listen more Shakespeare. What is in the name? Even if you call a rose outside of its name, it'll still smell as sweet.
Listen, you're not about to sit here and preach. So
Now
prove
it's
to me
true.
something in that book is true before I kick you.
Isaiah 19,
You wasted my
19,
time.
20. Do you know what gematria is?
First of all,
Miraculous alignments via letters infused with numbers serving as mathematical devices completely aligns the book of Isaiah chapter 19 verses 19 and 20 with the Great Pyramid itself, as every letter equates out to 5,449, which is ultimately the height in pyramid inches up to the capstone summit of the Great Pyramid. This trait of perfect precision is a unique signature as to the gematria being original to the Hebrews, and what was ultimately an imitation of gematria by the Babylonians, called Aru, is renowned to have not been able to be the origin of gematria, as it assigned values to whole words arbitrarily. In other words, the values were just made up for whatever reasons and alignments there were in the moment. Moreover, this degree of intimate knowledge of the pyramid is further proof of it indeed being architected by Enoch. And as displayed here, the accuracy of that scripture being as the pyramid is literally in the middle, in the midst of Egypt. As also Giza can mean border. And as time, by the grace of God, continues to reveal all things, all the more we have the return of that pure language which was promised. And here, before we move on to further proof of Genesis chapter 11 verse 1, that all the world was of one language, here we see how the formation of the numbering system was preserved throughout the years by the Hebrews. Here you will see proof that the hieratic is actually the original Hebrew characters. When you look it up, you will find that there have been hundreds of archaeological findings of this Hebrew hieratic being used throughout the Davidic kingdom's time period. You will also find that writings by the Zadokite line, which is the line since Aaron, brother of Moses, were also done in this original Hebrew, as well as other scrolls found in the Dead Sea Scrolls, as it has been so far in Israel. What has been called the oldest written, quote, religious inscriptions found in these original Hebrew characters. Now, archaeological findings are now proving that, quote, hieratic, that original Hebrew script, did not come after hieroglyphics. And furthermore, as you see here, archaeological findings are proving that ultimately that original Hebrew is also not younger or after the writings in Sumer. And as you see here, unlike what was held as usual secular consensus, it is indeed this Hebrew that later the Canaanite and Phoenicians also used without gematria. Now we'll again take a look at further gematria and mathematical alignments, such as the numerical equivalent to the first verse in Genesis 2701, the 73rd triangular number, the formation of a pyramid, continue to reveal the genius in our Genesis. As Genesis 1:1 and those 7 words consisting of 28 letters, which is the 7th triangular number that foreshadow the outline of the 7 days of creation, mathematically form the last of the original 7 wonders of the world, and is held to be made by the 7th patriarch since Adam, Enoch, as displayed in the infusion of letters and numbers which can represent mathematical expressions, such as in the first verse of creation, and also embedded within the pyramids themselves. Both Egypt and Babylon did not have pi down to such an accuracy. Egypt, for some time now, accredited by some with the creation of the pyramids, and both Egypt and specifically Sumer have long been accredited with the earliest records of writing. Now, as we'll see later in this sharing, the extents of science today holds that writing began virtually at the same time in both Egypt and Sumer, which again is consistent with Genesis, holding that all the world was of one language. We will also see the quote hieratic is not held to be younger than hieroglyphics, and again, hieratic, meaning priestly, is actually the original Hebrew script. That mathematical constant of pi encoded within the first verse of Genesis, and done so in several ways. Still, for years, it was claimed that pi was written in error in 1 Kings and in 2 Chronicles, mistakenly recorded as 3. However, when reading just a little further, an important detail is noted which reflects that it was completely accurate as to the mathematical constant of pi, as you see here. And as so much of this comes full circle and is all the more understood, the fact that the consensus of science aligns with our ancient holdings that the universe began with a central point, a singularity that in essence was a dense dot, a point which is ultimately a perfect circle, completely correlating why the mathematical constant known as pi, which is the relationship between a circle and its diameter, why this mathematical constant would be a key in creation. And just as we saw that the product of the gematria of Nekuda, which means point, and the ordinal value, the ordinal gematria of the first verse of Genesis, first appears at the 2701st index. Here we are seeing that mathematical equivalent of the first verse of Genesis first appears within the index of pi at the 165th place. Mathematical equivalent of the Hebrew word for point, nekuda, is the center of the ordinal gematria of the first verse of Genesis, a central point, a central nekuda. And yet, even deeper still, the Hebrew word Torah, meaning teachings, doctrine, instruction, or law, often used to represent the Bible, has a numerical value, a mathematical equivalent, a gematria of 611. And when we add up the sum of the first 611 digits within the index of pi, it equals 2701, the mathematical equivalent of the first verse of Genesis. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And to those in disbelief, or to those who just want to behold all the more how this painting was portrayed by our God, to view several ways in which pi has been encoded within the first verse of Genesis. That display, approximately a half an hour to 40 minutes long, can be found throughout my sharings, such as Christ clarifying our actual beginnings, and of course by reviewing the work of the angels named here. And further connection between the first verse of Genesis and pi is the fact that the first verse in Genesis is made up of 7 words that come out to 28 letters, and the first 7 digits of pi after the decimal point, those first 7 numerals equate to 28. 7 words in Genesis 1:1, 28 letters, 7 digits after the decimal point of pi equate to 28.
You gotta go, man.
Gematria is. Are you scared?
Stay calm. Stay calm.
Now, can you explain?
Stay calm.
Now, can you?
Gotta go, man.
Gematria is. Are you scared?
Now, this little punk house slave saying the word coon has no idea what he is talking about, as this is the same exact truth that caused those such as Nat Turner and John Brown to stand up. This is the exact same truth that caused Moses to stand up. This child here has no idea who or what he's talking about. I am truly the line of Christ by the grace of God. Hallelujah.